Are you concerned about all this corruption being misgendered as conspiracies? Well, don't you worry. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation as we talk with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the channel. It is me, Chris Brooks, for another LSB Film podcast. Today I'm joined with Irene Auckland. Now, Irene is a homeopath and a retired midwife. She's currently based in New Zealand, but her work has taken her all across the country, all across the world, rather. And so, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited as to being here. Oh, that's my alarm telling me to get up to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, by the way, for my viewers, it's now, what time is it there? 12:30?
Yeah, it's 12:30 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks.
Right. So thanks for having me on the show. It's great. I've done a few interviews already. It's been a journey from COVID, but before then. In 2015, I left New Zealand because the system was quite punitive. You know, you get one complaint, and I've never lost a mother or a baby in my entire career.
Well, that's astounding.
But they go through the system's built upon a complaint system, right? So you get a complaint, and even if the Health and Disabilities Commissioner decides that we're not taking it anywhere, the Midwifery Council will, if you don't tick their boxes or if you're different. So that means it goes to a practice competency committee, it goes to Health and Disabilities Tribunal. And what I've learned from this, it's just they just make money, you know. They just make money out of you, burn you out. It's just a business, and it's just a bank, as we know. So what happened is, I went to China for 5 years, the most amazing time in China. I've seen more of China than a lot of my Chinese friends.
Oh, really?
I've been, I was started off in Shandong province, which was a little place called Linyi, and then we went to Qingdao. But I've spent most of my time on trains, planes,
and automobiles
and boats, even.
Nice.
So we travelled right up north, up to Harbin, right down to the Vietnamese border on the southwest, and mainly a lot of the traditional hospitals. So we incorporated Chinese medicine I took homeopathy out there. We put working with a conscience back into the systems. We reduced C-sections from 65% to 9%. Which was quite amazing. And COVID came in, it was November, I think, end of November 2020. And that's when everything shut down because I couldn't do the face-to-face training.
And this was whilst you were in China?
Yeah. Well, I knew it wasn't right because I was on the stage speaking to 800 health professionals, you know, at one time. And because I knew thousands of them up and down the country, you know, there was nobody sick. I got, hundreds and hundreds of contacts on WeChat, and there was nothing. And so I really started to question, well, what's really going, what really is going off here? China didn't have such a, when they started the lockdown, we was in Qingdao, and everybody was friendly and kind. Nobody was attacking anybody for not wearing the mask properly. Even the little police guys came to the apartment because I was retired, kind of retirement age, to ask if we were okay and if we'd got food.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So much better than our old Bill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was really shocked, but we went down to the supermarket. I mean, they take your temperature when you got out the apartment, and then you'd have to walk to the supermarket and they'd take another temperature, and you didn't mind doing that. But the ironic thing was there was no distancing. You couldn't distance yourself in a supermarket when you're queuing up for vegetables in China. And the most ironic thing is that they did wear a mask, but they'd slide it down and they're getting the vegetables and they're just licking the bags, to
Oh, really?
to open the plastic bags to put the stuff in, and then you got to queue up, weigh
Oh,
them. And I think that I couldn't understand. Well, one of the things that got me is like the woman serving all the veggies, serving you on the way out. Like she's dressed up like somebody from outer space with all this PPE stuff and this headgear. I mean, you thought you'd gone onto a different planet,
mm,
but but they must have had it planned for that to happen so quickly. It's like,
oh, yeah.
me, well, how can they have all these people trained up to do all this stuff so efficiently? So anyhow, I stayed there for 10 months. I used to write articles actually because I am a bit of a journalist as well for the Foreigners magazine. So, it was COVID there, but like it wasn't as strict. And I remember I think it was May 2021 when they were still having lockdowns in New Zealand and March. I was out writing articles for the sailing club that was wanting new punters to start there, and we started happy hour sailing, and we were sailing around Qingdao on the boats on a Sunday, down the bars with the foreigners and all of that. So it was like when I got to New Zealand, they put us on a plane from Qingdao. It cost a lot of money. I think it cost us about $10,000 to get back, which is about £5,000 each, just the
Mm.
shipment back. And when I got back to New Zealand, it was quarantine, but I couldn't understand why it would travel from Qingdao to Shanghai, which was a few hours on the train, and nobody was wearing tight masks or anything. There was no incidences of COVID as far as I knew in Qingdao. I didn't hear anything. But then we got onto the airplane at Shanghai on Air New Zealand, and then there was social distancing. I even had to sit a seat away from my husband uh, on the
Ridiculous.
plane, and they were telling you you're not wearing the mask properly. And then we were flying into Auckland, and then they got up to level 2, so Auckland was shut down. So then they piled us all off the plane in Auckland, and they dumped us on a plane with everybody from around the world where there were supposedly high cases of COVID.
It's mental.
And then
Do
we
you
landed.
I
Go
have to
on.
say, do you think that China wasn't like that because they've spent years and years and years of being good citizens,
Yeah, yeah,
so they
yeah.
were driving it. They were trying to bring us up to their level of compliance, so they had to
That's
hit us
right.
harder with fear. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I reckon so because we wore it was like they're gentle, they're controlled but gentle. You could go out because, like, because I like write articles and stuff like that. You just couldn't talk about politics.
Right. Okay.
When I was socializing with the doctors and the nurses and everything, they were so happy to put us on their motorbikes. I used to sit on the back of a motorbike and they'd take me around to the restaurants and would go there and the girls were doing their thing. They'd be drinking the Chinese wine and having their beers and dancing and stuff like that. But you'd only talk about buying clothes or general things,
Yeah.
which was a big thing for me not to be able to talk about the real realities in the world. But there again, you've got to remember that when I was in New Zealand, see, I was born to Polish refugees, right? And my mum and my parents were displaced persons from Poland. They were the Volksdeutsche. So it was like grandparents were born in a Polish town and they were classified as German, but mum and dad were born there and they were Polish because the borders kept changing.
Mm.
So,
So you're a proper
so
Heinz 57.
oh, absolutely, big variety of that. So, kind of I could speak German when I was 5 years old. They didn't want me to learn Polish because then they could talk about their secrets, but I understood Polish. But I came to New Zealand and ended up marrying a Pole. That's why I've got the name Kalinowski.
Mm.
And I ended up helping run the Polish Association for 12 years and became president of the Polish Association and never put my foot in Poland.
I thought Auckland seemed like a funny name.
Yeah. But I mean, with doing that, you see, I mean, it was a lot to do with the Labour Party. You were our lovely Jacinda Ardern, wasn't it? And
Old horse
I've got
face.
to, I know them all because I used to cook food for them. I used to go posting things around the doors for them. I mean, when you think they were trying to kill you, you sort of
Insane,
look
isn't it?
back and think, oh my
Cool.
goodness,
Just
it's
think you could have done
insane.
something to the food and all sorts.
Absolutely. If I'd known, I probably would. But we'll put that by the wayside. So anyhow, what happened here is I wasn't going to come back into midwifery because I'd had enough of it basically, but I could see that they were in dire straits, not enough midwives. And there was a very special midwife. She's she spoke the language of her community and she worked really hard, but her personal life wasn't that great. And it was just something to do with like claiming. She overclaimed basically, which could have
Mm.
been resolved in about 20 minutes. Like, okay, you've done this, let's slap your fingers, pay us back, which she did. So they wouldn't let her claim. And she was being supervised and supervised and supervised, and they couldn't find anything wrong with the midwifery practice at all. So I says, well, you're not going to pay them back. Your community is going to lose you unless somebody can bail you out. So I says, well, let's do it lawfully. We'll get hold of the lawyers and see if you can subcontract to me as a self-employed midwife. So that's what she did, and she paid back $145,000. Yeah, quite a bit, but she
That's
paid
quite
it
a lot,
back.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but then it wasn't enough. They were attacking her. She'd had she'd lost, uh, had misses. She took the jab actually and continued after me, but I had to tell her that I couldn't practice because I wasn't going to breach my code of ethics.
No, good on you.
So what happened is I wrote to them all. I wrote in October. It was October 2021, just before they were going to do the jabbery do on everybody. And I kind of questioned them about the Bill of Rights, consent, breaching my code of ethics, uh, the shortage of midwives, women not getting their choices, the lack of care, not getting everyone. So I just took every paragraph and just called them all out for it. Just ask questions very nicely in a very professional way. So I sent it to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Health. I sent it to the College of Midwives, the Midwifery Council, and I knew they'd come for me because I could see, there was something not right here. So in when was it? November the 15th was the big D Day. So we had to terminate the care of 70 women, you know, between the two of us. And uh, well, that midwife, she did most of the care because I was not well. I mean, I was having issues because of the stressful thing of coming back from
Mm.
China and no money and no car and all those things. So what happened is I just couldn't take, I just couldn't do it. And I couldn't tell a pregnant mother to take something that I didn't know what was in it,
Mm-hmm.
And of course I'm a homeopath. So from 97 when I started homeopathy, we started to look into the fluoride and all the effects and the vaccinations in those days. And,
Mm.
we really we did lots of research on it and everything like that. So I used to question it. It's always somebody's choice whether they took it or not, but it was like, well, why would you want to give a baby 3 hepatitis B vaccinations within a few months? I'm a health professional. I've only had one and I'm still immune to it.
Yeah.
Why would we keep pumping these babies into them? Yeah. And then I question things like the diabetes, yeah, because when I was in Saudi Arabia, when I was working there, we didn't do anything unless the blood sugar levels were 13. Here and in the UK and the other ones, they put the rates down to 7.5 and 8. Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
well, we'll just give you some pills and then we'll put you on the insulin. Well, the insulin narrows the blood vessels, creates the problems. The diet doesn't resolve it. But as a homeopath, and I studied the natural therapies, so I had 98% normal rate with most of my women didn't get the problems because we catch it early and you work with them and you work in a preventative mode, right?
Prevention is better than cure.
Yeah. Well, that came up in the court case. But what happened so anyhow, I resigned and tried to get all the women settled down, and the other midwife was still working, but she couldn't claim because she was contracted to me, kind of thing. But she did work for other midwives. So she made sure that a lot of those women were okay because they said that you had to be vaccinated, but she wouldn't get paid for it. It didn't say she couldn't work. So she followed a lot of her women up to make sure they were safe. And she probably saw some of mine after I left. And then we came up to, I thought, it's not right, there's something wrong here. I was attacked by the manager, this Emma Farmer at the hospital that had bullied me before in 2015. And I've got to just say there, because I wrote 2 books, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery and With Woman, With Midwife, With Me. And the latter one was the memory of a midwife that took her life that went through the system, right?
Are these on Amazon or?
Yeah, they're on Amazon.
If you send me the
Kindle
links, I'll
books
put
on
those in the
Amazon.
video description.
Yeah, I'll send them to you. They're on Amazon. And I've actually given a lot away free. I'll just say if people contact me, I'll just send you a PDF because it's important to get the message out. So I had the bullying from that as well. So I knew they were going to be watching me. But on December, there was a lovely woman. She became my friend, actually. She was a really good friend. I'd left. And she was from India because I got contacts in India and I looked after lots of people from that community, reduce the problems they get, like the diabetes, the high blood pressure and stuff. So what happened was there is she was booked in the hospital, under the hospital, and she was booked to have a midwife who was vaccinated to look after her afterwards. The problem is it was so short between November the 15th, so December the 8th, I think it was, she came around to see me as like a daughter would and said, well, I can't get through to the hospital and my baby's not been moving, right? And she'd actually taken it was her choice. So I was concerned.
It's just unfortunate that it wasn't actually really that, what's the word? It was a choice, but it wasn't really without all the knowledge.
It was without the knowledge, and you couldn't give all that knowledge. All I could say is that I didn't know what was in there, and I couldn't advise you because I didn't know if the safety.
Informed consent is what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So what she did is, she came to see me, so I checked her over in my garden because I couldn't bring her into the house, and I just listened to the baby, and I rang the hospital up and said, oh, well, she's coming in, she's not had baby move, you've not given her an appointment, please give her an appointment. And got a text message, oh, she's fine, Irene, there's no problems. But she didn't get an appointment. But what I'd said to her was her parents couldn't come from India because of COVID, so she was alone. And the partner was working because the rent's so expensive here and they were struggling and the stresses and everything. So I said, well, you can walk around my garden. If you come in early labour, you can walk as your family would, as you would look after your own. You let them walk around the garden. And then it come to the time when she was going to the hospital. Well, I wasn't well in any, I got tube up my bladder and I wasn't totally well, but I said, I'd just come in and hold your hand. So I called the hospital and said she was coming in and that I would hold her hand. Well, then I was bad because I was told I was illegal. I was in hospital for 20 years. I was illegal, not allowed to go in there because my access agreement had been taken away and that I wasn't jabbed. So it was all around the hospital. I never told them I wasn't jabbed. I just didn't fill the papers in, kind of thing at that stage. So this manager, this Emma Palmer, I rang her up and I says, look, what's the problem here? You can just send me an email. Put your concerns down in paper. Well, I knew she wasn't going to do that. So I just thought, well, put your concerns in paper and I'll meet with you in the Perth. face to face, and we'll talk about it. But she didn't. She wrote straight to the midwifery council and told them I was practicing not vaccinated in the clinical setting, causing harm to the public. It's been my garden. So they all acted on that. I had secret meetings, and they all wanted me out because I'm this, this holistic preventative midwife.
Rebel.
Yeah, I'm trouble. I mean that I do think I'm very grounded, and the decision and the knowledge making. So everybody's different, care for everybody's different, and I just can't keep ticking off boxes. It's just not me.
No.
So anyhow, so I got that. So they suspended me. I got suspended, but before that, I resigned. Actually, I wrote to them on the 5th of December and said I don't feel safe. I sent them an email. I'd resigned, but they wouldn't accept my resignation.
Really?
And then they used this complaint against me to keep me in the system. Ready for now, they were going to take me to court. They were going to put me through the PCC or whatever it was, the Practice Competency Committee, Health and Disabilities Tribunal, and the courts. So I got fed up with it because I'd resigned. And I says, well, I've resigned. What are you doing? You've got no contract with me. When I was standing in the private. Yeah, so I gave them cease and desist orders. Just leave me alone. I'm retired. Well, that was it. I was vexatious, and I was going to cause disrepute to the public, to the disrepute to the profession, and all this. So I got really fed up because the paperwork was piling up and the threats were piling up, and I was not well. I was waiting for surgery, right? And they just kept hounding and they just would not stop, right? And I says, well, I've not done anything. I haven't even breached the mandate. I haven't worked, but they kept going and kept going. So I was the first midwife. I took them to the High Court. This is Irene Chain Kalinowski now versus the Midwifery Council. As constructive trustees under equity, breaching a contract, not having a contract, and all that. So it got quashed out in the High Court, which it would do, as they did with the farmers, because they couldn't understand English because they were in legalese.
Yeah, this is it. Well, this is what
And
I'm now doing. I've been studying, and I've got an experts to help me. So I've been writing affidavits to all, like, the NHS. It's going to be the land registry, the courts, and it's just to remove the jurisdiction, because you are the sole executor.
Well, what happened with that? I can tell you about that because it was the common law that I used in the beginning, because I'd got knowledge of it, right? I said, okay, well, I'll attend your interview providing you send me a contract. Are you fiduciary? Are you a public servant?
Yeah.
Acts by the crown and all that. So we sent that in and we even got their home addresses. So name, shame, and blame is now what you got to do. Yeah. There's some of the really peeved off.
Hold them to account.
Yeah, so that got quashed up, but I expected that to happen. But in their responses, you see, by the time I got to the High Court, I'd got 15 kilos of paperwork. I know they keep sending you bundles, but every time they responded, they just kept changing their story, and they were just putting a noose around their own neck, because now I got all the evidence. So as I was in the High Court in the February, they decided to put me through to the criminal court. This enforcement at the Ministry of Health opened a case against me for five forms, 2 ultrasound forms and 3 lab forms, which I'd given to 2 women, I think 3 women. And what I'd done is because I knew there was no midwives, I just gave them the forms that they'd need for their pregnancy. At least they could get their bloods and their scans done. So at the bottom of the form, I signed it and I put, you do it on this date. But they were trying to get me for having written them after I'd resigned, or after they'd suspended me. So they were coming great guns.
So they were going down the fraudulent route.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I went to the High Court, I was with Tracy from Inland's Air Water Council, which we'll talk about, because we actually gave the judge what you call a a trust deed, which is beneficiary to my legal name because we revoked the power of attorney.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the certificate was I'm beneficiary to the legal name. Because what the banks have done, the banks, because everybody's a bank, right?
That's right.
The
Even
banks,
the bench, when you go to court,
well,
bench is Latin for
yeah,
bank.
that's right. So what the banks do, the banks actually put, if you sell your property, even if you've paid it off, you get up there, and they've actually taken the power of attorney and got two people to sign it without you knowing. But it says it's a not revocable power of attorney unless there's an event. Well, an event's fraud.
Hmm.
So in Lansdale Water Council, in non-resident settler, they did a public notice and made a notice of an event and revoked the power of attorney.
Well done.
But there's a process to it, and
Yeah,
Juicy and
absolutely.
Lucy will
I'm
go over
always
that with
saying
you.
follow the process.
Yeah. So you've got to get them through, follow the process. So we gave it to the judge in the High Court, and she actually called me Irene. The whole court environment was very calm. It changed. That was the second hearing in the High Court. So meanwhile, I'm at criminal court. Well, I've never been a criminal before. I don't think I have. And I'm in this courthouse, and my name's up on the board. And like, I've worked there for 20 odd years. I mean, I've been at the birth to some of these families who are waiting in there to face criminal charges. And it's like, well, I'm just thinking, well, everybody knows me out here, and that's my privacy gone out the window. I'm already a criminal up here. So the first two judges, we went in there, and they were so rude, so abusive, because they hadn't given them at that time the trust deed or the certificate of beneficiary to legal name. So they were rude. I couldn't hear one of them, and I turned my head to one side, and she screamed at me, "I demand respect. You look at me. How dare you?" So I just stood up and says, "Excuse me." This is me being like this Polish part, I think, coming out. I just stood up and yells out, I've been around birthing families here in this community more than 1,000, and I'm not disrespectful to anybody, and I find you disrespectful to me. Well, that was it. That was another hearing set up, wasn't it? So now I was about to hit the third judge. But the third judge, I was in the court and I was getting fed up because he was a bit rude in the beginning. So I just served him the documents, the certificate and everything. I just walked up to him, put it on his desk and ignored the registrar and gave it to the lawyers. And he just stopped the court. And then he went away and came back half an hour later and he says, "May I call you Irene?" No, that would be very nice. And the whole court atmosphere changed, and he gave like direction. And the questions were about these forms. Was I registered at the time I wrote out the forms? Very easy. Oh, it was 5 charges at $10,000 a form. They've got this magical number, everything's 10 grand. It's like, and then you wonder where it's coming from.
So given the knowledge that you know, have you dropped the title Mrs.?
Yeah, I'm not a Mrs. and I'm not a Ms. They just keep changing that name to
It's all legal fiction, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah.
when you say, I mean, we're beneficiary to legal name and any variation of it,
Mm. See, I go
American
as
wife or
VC,
trespass.
a living man. Sorry, VC ... Chris Brooks, all lowercase, a living man.
Yeah, well, we don't even do the living man bit. We're just Irene born here.
Oh, okay.
I've got Tracy watching me. She's in the
Hello,
background
Tracy.
here. She's going to say hi. Hello.
Hello.
It's
Hello.
Tracy. You can sit with us if you want.
I thought she was talking to herself. I forgot that she was doing this.
Yeah. So what happened was then, so the criminal court, right? So that was like 4 lots of it. And then I got really fed up with this, and I'd accumulated now 15, 20 kgs of paperwork. They just send you bundles backwards and forwards. It's like, I've had private investigators at my house. My
Really?
poor husband's 76 and freaking out. So that's when we decided to start the international investigation team. Yeah, so we did the whole team. It's based in the UK, but we've got offices everywhere, and great minds come together. So they went through all the evidence that they'd given us, and we'd broken it all down. And we found out all their incompetences. There was a report that was I think it was about 300 pages, I think, of a report we submitted to them showing incompetences, showing how they'd lied. Then we did two evidence tables. One of the evidence was more based on what I'd submitted, and a couple of they never respond to anything. They just
No.
ignore what you write and create more and more events. So the charges kind of start at this bottom end, and by the done, they've had so many arguments, you've forgotten why you're there in the first place, because it just
Yeah.
keeps going on and on and on. Then you
No,
have to bring them back. So what we did is the international team, evidence table 1 and 2. The second one was calling them out for incompetencies in record keeping, because none of the forms had a place where you could write, well, I wrote this form out on this day, and you do the test on this day. And all I could say to the women was, and I've done it for 20 years and it's never been wrong for 20 years, and that you've always given forms in advance, okay? Because I work in a very preventative way. So in this investigation team, they kind of changed they started to bring in more arguments because they couldn't find anything on the lab or ultrasound form. The reports didn't come back to me. The ultrasound forms, they weren't there when they were made out. They tried to claim I was practicing. They tried to defame me. They tried to pull down my questioning. Like the woman had a history of
So
eclampsia,
they were
blood
basically
pressure.
going down the you're not mentally stable.
No, not mentally stable, not knowledgeable, and a dangerous midwife.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So when on the stand, they brought in their witnesses. They brought in the witnesses, and the witness was the advisor. She was an advisor to the Ministry of Health, but she'd never worked boots on the ground. I know her. Everybody in New Zealand, there's only a few million here, And over the years, so I questioned her because I said, well, okay, so you've got this woman, and there's no midwives around, right? And so it was COVID time. Normally I would see the women every month or every 2 weeks or every day if they wanted to see me then. So I said, well, it's COVID time. So I gave the forms because it was the best I could do at the time to make sure that at least she had something, right? And it was like they were trying to get me as being dangerous at that. And how could I know she needed these blood tests on her liver and that doing? I says, well, have you not heard of anticipatory care? See, I've written books on it. You see, I wrote 5 textbooks while I was in China. So I know the knowledge, right? And she says, oh, no, never heard of that. I says, well, what about preventative care? I said, you give some, the woman does the blood test at 24 weeks, but you'll give her the form at 20 weeks and say, this is what you have to do. Make sure you eat the right diet. Let's look at your mind, body. Here's something to help you. This is your pathway. And then you do the test at 24 weeks. I says, and if you do what we've talked about, it's going to come back more. This is how you prevent the problems, but they don't work that way. So she was trying to get me, I was dangerous. And I says, well, I've taken the woman's history so I can anticipate what's happening here and at least give her the tools. Because, I don't carry lab forms in my bed when a woman calls me up at 2 a.m. I don't carry them when I'm eating dinner, even though I get, the craziest of phone calls. It's usually a bowel problem while I'm eating the middle of my dinner, but you get used to that. So,
Yummy.
so like, this was going on and on and on. So I questioned the competency, right, of this, what was the name? Kaz Jane, who was supposed to be this super midwife. And I said, well, you can't touch me because I've got more knowledge on my little finger and first-hand experience than anybody in the country. Actually, I would say there's not many people in the world that's got the experience and knowledge I have. Yeah, so bring somebody in that's got the same
I'm certainly
amount
not
of
going
knowledge.
to quiz you, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. So the judge, I question this woman's competence. And she made a note of it 3 times in the courtroom, right? So then we got the other ones coming, okay? The Sue Calvert, Midwifery Council, she's the one that suspended me. So I questioned her, do you know your own statute? Section 39, section 40. You can resign in writing. You failed to accept that. A contract's unilateral. I says, and then you had secret meetings with this Emma Farmer and you suspended me on a lie. Well, of course she went yes in the middle of the courtroom. So she's
Really?
admitted
Well,
in our
thank you.
public inquiry in a courtroom with witnesses. Thank you very much. That's one out of the way. Yeah. So the next thing is that we had an amicus, the friend of the court, and he was a good guy. He was really good and working on both sides the best he could. And so the next thing is you've got the lab test guy coming in, and they expect it. I says, well, where does it say on your lab forms the date you issued the form and the date it got it done? I said, have you got any, and when a professional leaves, have you got any red flags to say they've left? Oh, we're doing that now, yeah, because our investigation report told them to do that they needed to do. That's their incompetencies, you see. So then he suggested, well, it's the duty of care to contact all the women and collect the lab forms back. Says, hang on a minute, you wanted me to breach your own Privacy Act? You've told me not to contact anybody. I can't talk to a pregnant woman, and now you want me to go down knocking on doors saying, I'm sorry, I've given you this form. Can I have it back, please?
Yeah, the hypocrisy.
Yeah, so we got that. So anyhow, that was going on for the forms, which they couldn't find anything for. So they decided to bring in this magical form on. They decided to bring this magical form on, what was it? It was on a prescription form, because they wanted to get me for going into a pharmacy, Caleb Townsend, this Jane Birdsall enforcement and everyone else, for going into a pharmacy and picking up a prescription for oxytocin, which you use to deliver the placenta, or they would use it in the hospital if they want to accelerate the birth, right? And midwives carry it in their bags. And I could see where they were going with this, because they wanted to entrap me into saying I was doing backstreet midwifery. Right?
Did you know, just quickly, did you know apparently the placenta is deemed as a sibling, and it's the placenta that they stick all the fiction onto?
Yeah. The placenta's the second twin.
Yeah.
The dead fiction. Yeah.
How weird is that?
Well, that's why you can talk a little bit about cutting the cord. That's why they cut the cord. I mean, that's been questioned since the 17th century. And when I wrote textbooks, I went right back to 1845 when cutting the cord was questioned, because at that time the obstetricians were homeopaths. And they were more bothered about how the physiology worked and to do no harm.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an incredible subject.
So anyhow, what was happening with these forms? I'm supposed to have gone into this pharmacy and picked up this oxytocin on the 3rd of June. And he lied in his statement. The investigation process report looked at that. So he lied in his statement to say, oh, it could have been picked up on that day or another day, and I can't remember. It was 2 years ago. And then we found out that in the courtroom, he changed it again. Oh, no, Irene was definitely there on the 3rd of June. And she definitely picked it up, and that's her signature. And I said, well, that's not my signature on that form.
Hmm.
I says, there's a funny looking horizontal
Squiggle.
T in front of it. Yeah, yeah. And then there's a hyphen after it. I says, it's a copy and paste. I says, but it's not my signature. And I've never seen a form like this before in 20 years. Never, ever. So they were adamant, this is your signature, this is her signature. It's all coming out in court on affirmations. And I'm saying, well, good on you, mate, because I was in the hospital having surgery that day. You know, I was having, I don't mind saying I had bowel surgery and I had to take an enema in the morning, and
Nice.
and didn't get home till 8 o'clock at night. So there's no way I was going anywhere.
No.
But according to them, I was supposed to be at a lab test because one of the women I gave a not dated form for, so she, on the 3rd of June, she was at lab test and I was supposed to be there prescribing forms for her and in the pharmacy and having surgery in the hospital 3
So
times.
basically, they're committing perjury.
It's perjury. It's the penalty of perjury. So we've got this 45-day report, and we'll give you a link to that because we've public noticed it.
Okay, lovely.
Okay. So what they've done is they have also, so they miraculously came in with another form on the 29th, for the 29th of December. Well, I remember picking a box up, even though I wasn't working, because I went in there, I get homeopathics from there and stuff like that. So I picked it up, but I looked at the box and I thought, it's made out to my personal name. Never had a box like that before. So I don't know why, intuition, I took a picture of it, right? And I dropped it off at the clinic, which is not far from my home, but I know I've not even set foot in the place. I just put it in a little collection box, right? To go in, and I never thought it would like come up again until they just out of the blue, they snapped their magic fingers and come up with another form. That was for the 29th of October, December. But they made a mistake because the invoices were made out to my professional name, right? And on the box was my personal name. So we know that going through the database where they'd got the audit woman, this Tanya Brownlee, she didn't come up with the database. She just took parts of it out to make it look I was prescribing to myself.
Cherry picking.
Which is a big no-no. Very nice of them. Yeah. Not under the practitioner thing. And that was another reason we found out that the forms were forged. So when all this came out in court, everybody lied on oath. They all were lying. I mean, they denied they didn't even mention that 29th of December one, and the pharmacist said he'd never seen it. It was the first time he'd seen it. Yet I was supposed to have signed it in front of it, magically coming out. So what happened was with that is I came out of the court. I mean, the judgment is going to be on the 10th of April. We kind of deferred that. So I got back to our international investigation team and I said, right, we want a full forensic report. And I sent them Jane Birdsall's diary notes, messages to Carlib, the pharmacist, the signatures. I sent them original signatures of mine on documents I'd filled in for legal things. And they did a full forensic report. And it was Jane Birdsall's 2 letters. The 2s actually matched the signatures on the forms. They found that Jane Birdsall had been coercing the witnesses, colluding with them, and writing the statements, and then getting the witness to check that the statement was right.
Blimey. See, when it comes to forms now, I cross out signature and like
Yeah,
autograph over the top.
yeah. Well, I just write an Irene by Irene for, but never in the box.
No.
So we've got the kangaroo courts. Yeah. What happened was we served the courts the beneficiary to legal name. I stood up and said, I'm Irene, born here in Timona Nui, Kiwi, Tangata Whenua, in God we trust, can't be complicit in fraud. The judge stopped the trial and we went into a side room. I was lucky Tracy was with me as well and said, look, don't have to contract with you. I says, I've already done a strikeout application on the Evidence Act, which has been ignored. All the processes were ignored. So I said, the only way I will contract is if you play a fair game, because the people have lost faith in these courts. And I can see why. When Tracy came up with that you must play a fair game, act in good faith, and follow your Evidence Act and your processes. So they agreed. So for the first time, I actually got 300 and something pages of the court transcripts,
Wow.
even though some things were out, which we could use, right? So we know. So in many ways, even though like there was no trust, it's like, well, somehow you've got to go through it to expose it.
Yeah.
But we've also got to say that there is a lot of good people out there. Not everybody's malicious or nasty or whatever, right?
No.
There
And
are
a lot of
some good
people just aren't aware necessarily they're,
No, they've just
because a
been
lot of it's
doing the job.
compartmentalized, and so they
Yeah,
don't
they've just been
realize
doing
what they're doing.
yeah. So, I wrote to them and told them I was bringing the independent media, which they allowed in the court. So we had counterspin media there,
Oh, wow.
editors
So,
writing this down. We
so
had
this, I was going to say, so this trial or case that you've got in April, are you
yeah.
able to record that?
Yeah, it's the verdict. Well, we can't probably not on the inside, but we can have the independent reporters in there.
Okay, because I
Okay,
wouldn't
it's going to
mind
be
covering that
big.
for you.
It's going to be big because this is worldwide now. Everybody knows about it. I wasn't keeping it back because I was really fed up with you've accused me of something I've not done. And no, I'm not going to say guilty to one thing when I haven't done anything.
Correct.
And you've got to prove it. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to keep going on and on and on, but it's exposed them completely. Okay. So they did a really good job here. And I think the team got back. Oh yeah, Jane Bird's all in her emails were all about the 3rd of June. And she even quoted in it because asking for the forms. Well, I haven't seen one, but I'll give it a go. Like she's going to make them up. And at the same time, can you believe they actually held me up? They started the Health and Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal. And so I was going through that, and they wanted to send me more bundles of documents. And I think you've probably seen that video. I think that was done with Juicy and Lucy, right? And we caught them out. Their minutes were nothing as to what was on that video. And it looked like he's acting as she's. And every time I talked about the Evidence Act, fair process, natural justice, it was, wow, well, give me a liability number. Oh, I'm a barrister, but I don't know what one of them is. So they wouldn't, I was only asking for her ID. I didn't know who she was, never met the woman before. I mean, she's sitting in front of, well, I'm the chair. And I says, well, good for you, but show
The
me who
trouble is
you
with
are.
barristers and most barristers and lawyers that they've all sworn an oath to the 12 bar guilds, haven't they? Or to the bar guilds. And so they essentially work for the beast.
Yeah. And they can lie in court. Lawyers can lie in the court. But when you stand in, when we stand in as men born here in Samoan Nui keyword because you can't be sovereign in New Zealand. It's impossible.
No.
So they know that because that's how we managed to turn it around. And I think it's got to be done peacefully. You can't go in there yelling and shouting out your rights because it
No, you
doesn't
have
get
to
you
be
anywhere.
respectful.
You've got to follow due process, and I think that if 1368 was the law, it's the law of due process or something like that, which is attached to the Imperial Laws Act 1988. I've got to go back. I've had to learn a lot about this. The way
You've done very well, I have to say.
Tracy's been a good guide in Inland's Air Water Council, non-resident settler. It's global. They've got offices everywhere. And we're seeing successes. We're seeing wonderful things. You know, because these enforcement, like the Jane Birds law, or I think it's a Roy Langley from Ministry of Primary Industries, who's been caught out horse rustling, by the way. Poisoning horses. Yeah. It's like, and then they've got a law to themselves. They just think that they're above the law.
Yeah.
And in their act, it says, well, we can do as we seem fit. I says, oh, no, you can't. You're a public servant.
Yeah.
You're not going to get away with that. And the only way we can bring satisfaction here is to name, blame, and shame them. Well, I did get threatened with a 10,000.
That's the trouble with the world these days. There's just no accountability.
Yeah. Well, I did get threatened with another $10,000 fine for releasing Emma Farmer's name in the UK. I says, well, I didn't do it because Juicy and Lucy did it. It's their platform. It's not in New Zealand.
That's a great name, isn't it? Juicy and Lucy.
Yeah, and Emma Farmer's name was mentioned 36 times in the criminal court in front of reporters. Mentioned on videos. Right. Seems to have disappeared somewhere. So Juicy Lucy wrote back and says, we own the platform. Good luck on name suppression. And by the way, if you want us to take it down, it's going to cost you £100,000.
That's right.
It's gone very quiet. Yeah, well, you've got to use their processes because they're failing them as well. They're failing their processes. And it's going to come down. I mean, when I walked out of that courtroom, because they've got handlers in there. There was a handler, he didn't like me at all, coercing the witnesses. There's other documents where she's just about written statements for the advisor of midwifery to the Ministry of Health. And it's like, well, it's all there in black and white. We've got all the evidence, and that's what you have to do. I could have walked away in the beginning, stomped my feet, and said, I'm man born here and all that. But I knew I had to go through and catch them out. No, and now they're exposed for what they're doing. Because I'm going to make sure that no other midwife takes a life or ends up suicidal. And they're all accountable because they're public servants. And if they fail in their duties, they will lose their homes.
Yeah.
Bottom line, through the processes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And on the way out, I did say, well, maybe the next court we meet will be the military tribunals, crimes against humanity, and I can't wait for those.
Watch this space.
We had, Counterspin Media was there, and they did the videos in and between and afterwards. So now this judge has got to do the right thing because the whole world's watching. There's no getting out of this.
No,
they've got to do the right thing. Well, it's not a arrestable event card, right? So I says, well, I want a trial by jury. She says, well, it's not an arrestable charge. So I says, well, why are we in a criminal court?
And also because the jury have the power to say this is rubbish. drop the thing. It's not just about whether they've got the power to deem you guilty or not guilty. They could say this act or statute is pathetic, get rid of it. And they have the power to do that. And that's why you don't really get many. I mean, there's a difference between a jury trial and trial by jury.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
yeah,
people
yeah.
don't realize
So,
that.
no, and yet because in non-resident settler in Timor and Nui Kiwa, we are our court.
Mm.
We are the court. We've already agreed it's nonsense.
Mm.
Well, we don't have to agree with their court, but I think that the more open up to it, if you're looking at the contracts for the health, it's not just midwives. It's the teachers going through this. It's all the professionals because you're just a money machine for them. There's no Hall of Fame. You can't see any pictures of the great midwives or the great obstetricians or anyone. Now, I was in China and they've got in their hospitals, they've got pictures of all their midwives and they're proud of their achievements, even though a lot of the training's not right. And I cried when I saw a lot
it's
of
fair
things.
to say that China's made to appear much worse than it actually is?
Yes, it is a lot worse than what it is. I've had obstetricians and midwives together, and they were crying when we were there. They were crying because they wanted to reduce all the C-section rates, right? It was the directors that were pushed by Big Pharma. Yeah.
Because they don't make cures, they create customers.
Yeah, well, it was like the fear zones of women, because if women, they would tell women, oh, well, you're pregnant and you're not be able to breathe properly, so we'll charge you 10 yuan and stick some oxygen up your nose. And then another 20 yuan and we'll stick a monitor on you. Yeah. Well, there were things that when we talk about, I'm going to talk about, could talk about the child tea ink? Right, because that's huge. And when you look at in China, a lot of the hospitals, if a baby is in a special care unit, the parents can't go in and see it.
Really?
No, they can't even go in and breastfeed the babies in there.
Which I imagine would have such a detrimental effect to the baby.
Well, and the mother, because it was like, they can do the breast massage to try and make the milk come. And when I was walking around, I says, do you not think there's something missing here? And they looked at me and I says, the baby. I said, she's not going to have milk when they have the baby.
Well, that's all right.
Right. So it was like getting them away from the task-orientated tick-off boxes. Yeah, and that's what we've got here. It's no different. You've got tick-off boxes, but we've got some great midwives. The great, the home birth midwives, they use the natural therapies, but they've tried to stop them from doing that. And they're driving the births back into the hospital for this. Okay.
Yeah.
And control.
Absolutely. Well, my slogan for my channel really is take back control. Since I've been doing these affidavits and stuff, it's all about take back control. You are the executor.
Yeah, well, the social, you see, I go out and I teach the communities now. What's the solution? We've got inexperienced health professionals coming from overseas. They're in there. They don't know anything about birth. If you're a dad, you're not educated about it. No one knows about it. So what happens when you lose control? It's like a car that's lost its brakes, or the tires skid on the road, and then you've got the trauma. You've got the interventions. Yeah, so what we did with Inland's Air Water Council on rumble.com, My Body, My Baby in capitals, I've put up 80 videos so you can all learn about your bodies and know you can all self-care and you can prevent it, and it's for free. And I'm just suggesting that everybody goes there and learns about it. You know,
Make
it's
sure
like,
you send me the links, and I will put that in the video description.
yeah, I'll send you the full link with everything on it. I've even put, again, I think 42 homeopathic remedies together that you can access yourself and work out for yourself, right? The biggest thing for me is the lack of education on purpose, right?
Mm.
When I came back from China, I realized that when I'd written my books, actually, because I felt really proud, I went to the university and said, "Oh, I've written these books." And it's like, "Oh, really?" You know? And I realized they were throwing all the books away more than 5 years old. The students coming through, they're not allowed to look at a research paper or anything that's more than 5 years old. So that wiped out all the observational skills. They wiped out the entire art of it.
They're wiping out the knowledge.
Yeah, so what happens is, well, it's a bit like the COVID thing with the scam of the symptoms, isn't it? You tap in a symptom and then the machine tells you what to do. Well, this is like what's happening with childbirth, right? So like the poor woman will come to the midwife, but the midwives couldn't look after themselves. I was treating many with homeopathy. How can you look after a pregnant woman if you've got no knowledge about your own body
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
how to help it? Yeah. It's the same with the doctors, but what they're doing is they're contracting to other providers. So if a woman's got a twinge in the little part of her back or she's got a twinge somewhere else, it's like, okay, well, if it's part of your back, you can go to the physio. Yeah. And then you can go to a chiropractor, or then you can go somewhere else or somewhere else. And the poor woman who's pregnant, who can hardly take time off work because most of them are working, doesn't get fixed because they haven't got time to go to these places or they haven't got the money to do it.
No,
So it's intentionally there to make them get worse.
Mm.
You
See,
know, when you realize that,
we're really lucky because my mum, she's a qualified hypnotherapist, and so
hmm,
she done the hypnobirth.
yeah,
And apparently my wife was the perfect student to, because there was no
mm,
pushing, there was nothing. She had a water birth both times, and
yeah.
she just breathed them out in waves. No drugs.
Well, you see, the pain's the fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time as well, a lot of the women when they know their body, I mean, I compare it with dolphins giving birth. Okay, my cat gave birth to 8 kittens on my bed. I was young at that time. I was in the Middle East, and I think I had a couple of Bacardis, and I thought I was seeing things, and the cat was walking around, right?
It looked like a
And then
scene out of
suddenly,
Gremlins.
yeah. So she jumps on the bed, and there she is. She gives birth to 8 kittens, all upside down. Everywhere else, she eats the placenta. The babies get to the breast. The animals do that, but
That's
we've
right.
put so much fear into it. So the fear stops the baby coming down. The adrenaline, it contracts everything. Once
Mm.
you shift that, my granny had 13 babies in the villages of Poland. She didn't have hypnobirths, she didn't have anything because they were amongst other women birthing.
Mm.
Yeah. If you're born up like I was with my sisters, there's like 14 years difference between us. I saw their kids' birth at home. So I grew up not being fearful of birth. But they've driven that fear because they've kept people out. They've kept the experience out. Okay. They've made it so hard for families to keep working. Like you've got no time for anything. You've got to come put bread and butter on the table. You haven't got time to share the knowledge. Then they put you into rented accommodation. When I grew up, I was lucky because Granny was, we had chickens and geese and everything in
Mm.
the backyard. And if I got a sore throat, she got me the sage and I used to gargle that. Granny's chicken soup or the cabbage soup in
Yeah, they
winter,
always say chicken's the best thing if you're getting a cold, chicken soup.
Yeah, so that's what she kind of, I was brought up with that, but I was also brought up with my dad because he was renovating the houses. So I learned to read plans. I learned to hang up wallpaper. I learned 5 bags sand. I think from what I can remember is 5 bags sand and 1 cement makes the concrete for the driveway. And me and my brother used to have the little wooden thing and go along with it and do all this. But here they've put rented accommodation, so you can't decorate it. You
No.
can't do your garden because you're going to get thrown out. So these kids are growing up with no skills.
Mm-hmm. Even down to what they're taught in schools.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we have to question a lot of that. I mean, I question the new students coming out to do midwifery.
Mm.
They're academic. I mean, I trained hands-on, boots on the ground in the 70s. I was trained in the hospital, right, with the experts every single day. They paid me £8 a week to do that, to do my training.
Mm.
And you got hands-on with the skills. You sat and you had cups of tea with the obstetrician or on the medical rounds, and you'd learn, and we would teach them the practical and observational skills, and they would give us their knowledge. Well, they divided that. They put the big hospitals up where you've got to walk 20 minutes to get to the coffee room, and then you're running back because you're running out of time, or the doctors have a separate room. And if you go into the lectures here, you hardly see obstetricians and midwives in the same classroom. We did in China. I had everybody in there, pediatricians, obstetricians, and we had to change mindsets. We had to get them to work with a conscience. We had to go back to the ancient philosophy, which there was more Taoism, right? To work with a conscience. We had to get them to hug themselves, to be able to connect with themselves, because it was just like a machine going into those hospitals. They were just giving papers out. You go away and you do this test and then you come back. And then when you teach the obstetricians to be able to do a bit of a birth dance with a woman,
it's almost like you're just trying to raise their frequency, rise the vibration.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we did kind of all the way through it. And that's what brought the, you should see that the happiness in the workplace. Here it's bullying.
Yeah.
It's
I think
bullying.
It's not just there. I think that's
envy,
across
it's
the board.
jealousy. It's more than that. Yeah. And well, the thing is it's the system that has like a tick off box, and they have their standards, and their standards, you can't really move away from them. So if you're kind of creative like I am, because I'm an author, I mean, I sacked the first homeopathic school because it didn't have an open mind. Didn't have I always say a midwife mindset,
No, that's great.
And that's because
it's the authenticity that shines through with you.
Yeah, but I think I was destined to do this. So if I look at my life, it's a jigsaw puzzle, the textbooks, the new curriculum. We're ready to go for our new world. Okay, we're just waiting for the green light. It's all ready and waiting.
Well, listen, Irene, I've absolutely loved listening to your experiences. Please stay in touch. I'd love to know how you get on with this case coming up in April.
With the result, yeah.
So maybe we could come back on and have a revisit and talk about that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, maybe we could pull on board. I think I'd love to pull Tracy on with this, because she's been beside me all the way through it.
Let's do it.
Because of her knowledge with the process. I mean, I knew nothing about I knew nothing about how can I say? I knew nothing about the trustees, the beneficiary to the legal net. I knew there was a way, right? And I tried the common law way, but it backfired.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why the process is so important.
So the process is so important. So, and that's what Tracy's created in Landsay Water Council with the teams. And putting these processes through, it's like, okay, well, we've served this investigation report with a G36 notice to admit facts to the lawyers, to the pharmacist, right? And they've got 5 days to answer. And if they don't, we will go on to what you call a G32, which is I can't even say the word, an interlocutory application without notice, because now it's fact.
That's right. An unrebutted, oh, it's like affidavits, an unrebutted affidavit stands as fact.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of the way we write the affidavits as well, because it's an admission to fact.
Yeah.
And it kind of, the G32 actually is an affidavit of service. So what they will get is the affidavit of service, the date they received all these, it will get stamped, and it'll be, when did you answer to this, right,
Brilliant.
in the court. We're probably going to throw that in before the judgment day. They've got till next Thursday, which I don't think they'll answer. And then it'll go through, and I'm just saying, well, what can they do? Because we've got evidence of perjury in the courts.
Yeah. Perfect. It's perfect.
You
In
know,
some ways, you don't want them to respond because then that just clinches your
admit
deal.
to facts.
Yeah. I'm
Well,
waiting
it's
for a response from my bank at the moment.
yeah. Well, they're dealing. We've got the beautiful thing about non-resident settler in Lansdale Water Council is that there's lots of communities coming together, thousands, and it's
Mm.
growing very quickly. So everyone's got different problems, but yet
Yeah.
they're coming together. So someone's sorting the bank. We've got brave souls doing the banks at the moment, right? I mean, just like I've gone through what the process for what we've learned from this is going to make it easier for others,
That's right. Yeah.
right? And so we've got brave souls going through the banks, and you got the rates. So the process has to be there because not everybody can do it.
Yeah.
You know, so you need the help. So there will be, templates and support. So you've got people dealing with the farmers. Yeah, they've got their issues with the banks and the power of attorney. So there's a process for them. So it might be a farmer in the north and a farmer in the south, but they're going to come together, right? And this is how we go. And what I've done is, you see, I've already got spiritual birth units. They're already built. I'm over the river with the wellness hubs. Yeah, because we're going to have wellness and akasha experts that are the spiritual healers in the communities,
Well,
and it's
that's
going to be
awesome.
communities teaching communities. That's going to come. So we can I can talk about that later at another time, because
Yeah.
we can't cover everything in one day.
No.
Um,
I've got the kids to
but there's
pick up.
lots of things that are coming, and I think we have to give the optimism out there and the solutions.
Well, this is
We've
it,
got
and
to
that's what my
start
channel has
giving
been about.
solutions.
You
Yeah,
know, there's a lot of YouTubers out there talking, but they're not
yeah,
actually doing. And so that's where I've kind of, obviously for my benefit, stepped up, and I'm leading by example, if you like. I'm correcting all my errors, because you need to correct all the errors before you can actually
Mm,
attack the system. You need to cover your bases to make sure you're well protected, and then you go in because you've covered your
that's
bases.
right.
And
And
that's
and
what
the
I'm
other
showing.
side. Yeah, that's and it's brilliant, and it's love to and that's why we're all connecting, because that's where we're going
Mm,
through. I haven't got time for everyone that's just talking about something without a solution to it. It doesn't work.
that's it.
I've been helping a lot of the vaccine injured uh, pro bono. We do that in Lansdale Water Council. Some good souls donate. I think I've got 200 homeopathic bottles. I've put a jab support remedy to help with
Oh, cool.
shedding together, uh, getting that out to the communities. And, people have been so kind, because when I came back from China, I lost everything. I lost, you know, it's like my income was gone. It was like the car was gone. The house was
Starting
neglected
from
when they
scratch
got
again.
back. You started from scratch. Yeah.
Mm.
And well, yeah, the communities came, because I did so much before I left, is that somebody turned up with a car I could use, and then I helped someone out emotionally with the homeopathy, and he turned up and brought the wood for my deck so I can do my veggie garden. And it's just grown. It's like, well, as a midwife, I mean, I don't even mind saying we were on about 120, $150,000 a year, right? And so I've gone down to a pension.
I'm worth every penny.
Oh, and we're doing just fine.
Mm.
Do it.
Brilliant.
I'm much happier
No, that's
than
brilliant.
we ever had.
Well, thank you
So
very
sending
much.
Sending you
Thank you.
blessings and love and light. And, you know, it's going to be an amazing year this year. I know it's coming soon.
I've always said 2024 is a pivotal year, and I think there's going to be
Yeah,
a lot of good change this year.
absolutely. You can feel that awakening and that lifting because a lot more people are starting to be a little bit more open.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah,
like 3 years ago, I actually got a trespass notice for not wearing a mask in Black and Safe.
don't
I
get me on
sat
the
on the
masks.
floor,
But no,
nearly got arrested for that. Unbelievable when we go back and see what we went through.
we've
And I can
certainly
do
come
another
out.
one because I nearly lost my husband under the pretense of COVID. I had to take him out. I didn't see him for 5 days. They did the remdesivir and gave him Valium
Really. Yeah,
4 times a day.
that's definitely
So
one
he's
for another
76.
podcast. But
So we
yeah,
can do that another podcast.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I'll
Right.
give you the links to non-resident settler because all this I was on public notice and non-residentsettler.org.
Okay.
And I'll send you a link to the other videos and the books and things they can get a hold of.
Brilliant. Lovely. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you
Well,
very much for your time
you
and your
too.
experience.
Catch up with you
And I hope
later.
everybody else has enjoyed listening to this podcast. But for now, God bless, take care, and I will speak to you again soon.